Everybody, welcome to this week's edition of This Woman Can. I am your host, Janice Sutherland, career strategist for the professional woman of colour over 40. Now, my guest this week is rather special. And yes, I know I said that every week all my guests are special, but this one is extra special. Sharon Ehrlich is a Bronx-raised Afro-Latina and proud native New Yorker. Her business career started in the healthcare industry, where she spent nearly a decade as a hospital administrator in both public and private hospitals in New York City. A love story led to her permanently relocating to Austria, where she quickly came to the realization that her MBA and previous professional experience was nearly useless in her search for employment, owing to her not being able to speak the local language, German. So hence began her journey of reinvention. Sharon, welcome to This Woman Can.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here, Janice.
I'm delighted to have you. So I stopped your bio at the part where the love story kicked in and you relocated to Austria. But tell us about your reinvention, the process you had to go through, or the journey from that point.
Well, I have to say that I wasn't under any sort of extreme pressure to start working. So I had time, and this is a luxury that a lot of people don't normally have when they're reinventing themselves. And so what I started to do was just to work part-time. And so I took a job teaching English to executives. And that was a really great way for me to start to meet people and create my own circle of friends and contacts. And then I joined some professional networks, English-speaking professional networks. And then through those networks, I started to meet women and then started to become aware of career options for myself. So that's basically how it started.
Excellent. So what has been your kind of career journey from that point then? Where have you transitioned? If obviously you had to learn the language, like you said, then what would have been your, I suppose, your first foray into work in a foreign country?
Yeah. So the logical step for me at that time was to try to look for a multinational or transnational organization to work for. So I started with IBM, and that was a really good step for me because the company language was English, although I was based in Vienna, and it was a headquarters position. And so everybody who I was dealing with on a daily basis was English speaking. But honestly speaking, I had to start from the beginning, so I left a middle management career in New York, which was really on the trajectory of becoming an executive. And I had to take a entry-level operations position in part of a sales organization. And so that's how it started. And the fact of the matter was I was just really happy to be working at the time. And I didn't see it as a career. I just thought I'll do this for a little while until I could get back into healthcare. But that actually never really happened.
Okay. So what was the next step after that then?
Well, there was a point where I had to come to terms with the fact that I would never return to my old profession.
Right.
And when that happened, and I have to say, I was really slow on the uptake there. So it took me a number of years to come to that realization that that was not going to happen. At that point, I decided, okay, this is my career and I have to make the best of it. And I was really fortunate to have a manager who was actually the first Eastern European woman to become an executive in that organization. And she took me under her wing and she became my mentor as well as my manager. And she, it was brutal. She gave me some really tough advice. And she said, if you want this to be your career, these are the things you need to think about. And I had a good think on them. And I decided, okay, this will be my career and I'm going to forge ahead. I had no experience being a corporate citizen. I came from the healthcare industry, and it's a completely different atmosphere. It's a completely different way one goes about navigating their career, but I had to learn it quickly, and I wanted to because I knew I didn't want to have a job. I knew I wanted to grow and I wanted to learn and I wanted to move forward. And of course, I wanted to earn more money as well.
Yeah. The couple of things I take away from what you've just said is that what I call the get you by job. You know, it's a job that's not your career, but you know it serves a purpose. And, you know, and I think a lot of women need to understand that just because you're in a point in your career where, you know, where the job isn't what you envisaged it, where you envisaged you would be, doesn't make it a bad thing.
Right.
You know, it serves a purpose, be it financial, be it able to network and stuff like, or keep you engaged in the corporate world or work. And I think that's not a bad thing. That's a bad thing at all. And then the second thing I want to take away from that is that when you had your epiphany that you're not going back to this isn't Kansas anymore, Toto. You're not going to go back to your old career. So what was the realization? What made you suddenly realize that, look, you're not going to go back into hospital administration?
Well, there were a couple of things. I think, I was quite naive in thinking that there would be a pathway for me to re-enter that business with the level of German that I spoke.
Yeah.
I came to the realization that, and the understanding and the fact that the way that hospitals run in Austria is very different than how hospitals run. I was a business manager in a hospital in the United States. And in Austria, it's at least at the time, it was very much more of a social sort of venture. And there was really no role for me. There was no single job that I could find that I could do based on, and make a really smooth transition from what I did in the States. And so, but that took me quite a long time. I think for a long time, I was in denial. And I just thought, I'll find my way. I'll meet people, I'll network. And I was doing a lot of networking and I was meeting a lot of people. But then there's a time where you just have to get real and understand, what am I fighting for? Am I fighting for something that will never actually come to fruition? And if that's the case, do I want to continue to do that and stay frustrated? Or do I just want to hit the reset button and really think about what are my opportunities and what can I take advantage of, which is available to me today? Right. And that is what happened with this conversation that I had with my mentor.
Excellent. And one of the things you said there is one of the reasons a lot of women, what I find one of the main reasons why women don't want to change career mid-career is when you said that you had to start from the bottom and work your way back up. How did it feel for you? I mean, you're probably a unique situation because, as you said, you'd moved countries, language barriers and stuff like that. So your options, as you've already highlighted, were somewhat limited. But when you realized that's the path you had to go, how did that feel for you?
Well, I can say that when you grow up in a very, very capitalistic culture, that is a bitter pill to swallow. When you grow up in a city that considers itself to be the center of the universe, and making money is everything, and your level in an organization is everything. That's a really tough thing to come to terms with. But the fact of the matter is that was a moment in time in my life where I could do that. I was a lot younger than I am today. I would not make that same sort of sacrifice in terms of my salary and my level of responsibility in an organization. So I could afford to do it then because of my age and where I was. I wouldn't necessarily make the same choice today if I was put in a similar position.
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you for that. And fast forward a few years, I know you've recently started a new role.
Yeah.
So, and obviously it's not, it's a few years on from when you first moved to Austria. So what has been the best thing about having a mid-career change or changing careers at this point in your life?
Well, what I can say is I know more about Sharon. And so I know what my values are. They're really important to me now. And there are certain non-negotiables in my life now. And so when I decided that I wanted to move out of IT and move into a completely different industry, I was very, very, very thoughtful about the organizations I was interviewing with, because I didn't want to put myself in a position to then, have another IT position put in front of me with an incredible salary and with a nice title, but still end up doing things that and working in an industry that I didn't have a lot of passion for.
Yeah.
And so that, I think that was really instrumental in my making the shift that I made, because I knew what I wanted.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily know what industry I wanted to go to, but I certainly knew what kind of environment and what kind of culture I wanted to work in. And that was what I was able to find.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So what did you fear most about changing careers at this stage?
Yeah, I'm going to sound like a really superficial person, but I have to give this a little bit of context.
Yeah.
When you have trauma in your life, and particularly trauma that relates to financial insecurity, then the point of being able to make a certain salary and be independent and know that every month you're going to get paid X amount of euros or dollars is something that is always not even in the back of your mind, but always in the forefront of your mind. And I came from that sort of situation where there was a lot of financial insecurity when I was younger. And so, money has always been something that has been important to me. And I'm not saying that it's a good thing or it's a bad thing, but at least I understand the root of it and where it comes from, right? And so, I wouldn't say that it's the be all and the end all, but financial considerations are a big step for people. If you realize that I have to give up a 6-figure salary and start again, and I have obligations, I have parents, I have children, I have debt. That's a tough one, and that really needs to be negotiated in a way that you don't put yourself at risk. And I think that is one of the larger considerations for a lot of people, women, and certainly was a consideration in my case as well.
Yeah. And I totally understand you, the financial trauma, because I found myself after my first marriage where I lost everything financially, house, debt, with 2 children. And that still plays a part in my mindset now when I'm going to make decisions, when I'm going to spend, you have to be really cognizant of it, because it can eat away at you without realizing it if you don't understand the rationale behind it. Right. So I think it's a great answer, and great that you have that awareness.
But equally, it shouldn't prevent you from doing things, right? And that's equally as important, right?
True. And one thing I just picked up on there, which you didn't say, but you are part of the sandwich generation. So you have children and you have parents. So how has that played a part, impacted you from a career perspective at this stage?
That has had a profound impact. I would say the last 8 years of my career have been profoundly impacted by the fact that I had to be 100% responsible for a disabled parent and was raising a child at the same time. And of course, married and trying to run a household. And it was a juggling act that sometimes brought me to my knees with all of the responsibilities and obligations, having to travel where most people would just pack up a suitcase and go on a business trip. I had to prepare meals, arrange care for an elderly person and a child. Those are, a lot of people are going through it. So my situation is certainly not unique. But I definitely cannot say enough that that situation really played a great role in my understanding that I need to work for an organization that allows me the flexibility enough to be able to manage my private situation. And again, I consider myself to be quite fortunate to have found that as well.
Excellent. So thinking about your career transitions over the years, and maybe in the latter part of your career, what would have made your journey easier, do you think, Sharon?
I think what would have made it easier was, getting off the roller coaster and really sitting down and having time to reflect. And I think that this is something that a lot of us don't allow ourselves to do just because we're running and doing and doing and doing. And the other thing I would say is hiring a professional to help you navigate that is really important. And you understand that because you and I worked together when I was at a really challenging time in my life where I just felt like I need somebody else. I need a sounding board, someone who is completely divorced from my situation, who can be objective and ask me the right sorts of questions so I can think about what I need for myself. And so I think that's the most difficult part, is just having this opportunity to stop, to take a breath, and to regularly reflect on your current situation and where it is that you want to find yourself.
Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. So of all your transitions, what would you have said was, or throughout your career, what would you say one of the biggest challenges and how you overcame it, and what did you learn from that?
I would say one of the biggest challenges I had was I tried to be self-employed once. And so I took a buyout from one company and decided I will go out on my own and I will see what that's about. And that was incredibly challenging, as you know, because you're a businesswoman, right? So you have to run your business, you have to do the marketing, you have to do the networking, you have to do the bookkeeping, you have to do everything. And I absolutely underestimated how many calories that takes to get that done in a day. And I wouldn't say that I was a failure, but, I came to the realization after a period of time that this is not for me. I do believe that I have an entrepreneurial mindset that I'm able to bring to the organizations that I work for, but I understand that I am not the person who, at least at this moment in my life, can strike out on her own and take on all of those roles. I just don't have the head for it. And so it was a learning experience. So, I like to consider that to be part of, that I do have a growth mindset. I did it. I learned from it, and I was able to dust myself off. I didn't lose money. So, that's a good thing. And I was able to dust myself off, and I was able to redirect again. So, I've had a lot of do-overs in my life.
Excellent. And you mentioned failure there. And most people perceive failure as failure. But I actually think there's a lot that can be learned, as you said, from that process. So how has failure made a positive difference in your life?
So what failure has taught me is, in that particular failure, was that I was not asking for help. I was really trying to do everything by myself. I knew a lot of people who were in business for themselves, where I could have tapped on their shoulder and presented some of the challenges that I was having, not to ask them for solutions, but just to talk it out and maybe even get solutions from them. And I didn't do that. I just somehow thought, this is my thing and I'm going to forge ahead and I'm going to do it by myself. And in the end, I realized that there were lots of people who probably could have supported me, but I somehow was wearing this armor where I felt like that would have been a failure to ask people. And now I understand that that was the wrong posture to take. And so if I were to do it again, and there's always the possibility that I might strike out on my own because I wasn't traumatized by that experience, I know that it takes a larger community. And I think the most important thing is to already identify in advance who are the people who are you're going to be your advisors in different aspects, so that you can have a sounding board, people to get advice from. And I would say that that's probably the largest learning experience from that, which of course then I can use working for any organization, right? Because if you take on any sort of a role, I take on a role in an organization and also as an entrepreneur, right? And I know that I cannot run that part of the business by myself. I need to collaborate and cooperate with lots of people, and there will be lots of things about the industry I don't know, and I'll have to ask people to help me get the clarity that I need so that I can make the decisions that I have to make.
Excellent. And I think, asking those three little letters ASK are sometimes one of the most difficult things for women to do, because we see it as a sign of weakness that we can't shoulder all the responsibility, we don't have all the answers. We can't ask for this, we can't ask for that. And it's just the wrong, for me, knowing that you need this support is actually the sign of strength. Because that's such powerful insight into how you tick and how you operate as an individual, that, you know, why wouldn't you take the support to make yourself successful? I just never understand that.
Absolutely.
You know, but we're told to be these, you know, it's almost like the strong Black woman trope, you know, carry it all on your shoulders. You know, you've got this. No, well, I haven't got this.
Yeah.
I need help. I need help. Yeah.
Exactly.
So what advice, Sharon, would you share with women who are embarking on their own career change, their own transition?
Well, I think an important question to ask yourself is whether you're running away from something or running towards something. And that's an important question to ask yourself, because oftentimes one thinks, I need to change my career because you're unhappy with what you're doing with the people that you're doing it with, or the organization that you're doing it with, right? And that kind of clarity is important, because if you can come to understand where the source of the need for change is, maybe you don't have to reinvent your career. Maybe you just need to change your industry, right? You know, maybe it's a difference between working for profit or nonprofit, or working in one sector versus another sector, which is a completely different kettle of fish than saying, I'm completely changing my career, right? So I think one needs to really understand the source of the desire to change. And then that clarity at least helps you start to plan out the roadmap of how you're going to get to where it is you need to be.
Great answer. And I think that's great that you said that, because when people hear about transition or change or career invention, they automatically think, oh, I've got to change from being a corporate person to being a brain surgeon. And it's not about that. It's actually, as you said, you know, where are your skills best suited? You know, could it be culturally? Could it be, you know, academically? Could it be from the skill set you have? You know, there's so many different nuances, and all those are change.
Right.
All those are elements of change. So fabulous. Thank you for that. So we're coming down to our last few questions, Sharon. What advice do you wish you'd given your 20-year-old self?
I think I would have told myself not to take it all so seriously. When when you're young, and when you grow up in a certain kind of environment, the environment that I grew up, as I mentioned before, was economically challenged. My parents were not professionals. There was an aspiration that I would be the first, the first one to go to university, and the first one to do this, and the first one to do that. And when you have that sort of pressure on your shoulders, you then think, well, if I'm the first one, then I better choose a course of study that is serious, right? And that's, that doesn't necessarily get you to where you need to be. And I think when you're young, you should study what you want to study, something that you enjoy, something that you feel passionate about. It will take you to where you need to go eventually in your career. But to say, I'm going to study business because I know I'll get a job working in corporate, whatever. I think that's probably a mistake, and you end up directing yourself in a sort of unnatural kind of a way, and not towards things that you feel a lot of passion about. So that's probably something I would have told my younger self. Although at 20, I was nearly finished university, but I would say, I still had my MBA in front of me, and I made the same decision when I did my MBA. I didn't do my MBA in something where I had a lot of passion. I just did my MBA in something where I thought, I think there's a lot of growth in this area, and that's where I'm going to do my MBA. And it didn't really have to be that way, you know?
And I love that you said that, because the motivations as to why we do stuff when we're younger are often not our motivations. And we often know as women of color, as Black women, that our success equates to our parents' success. So that and that's why you have so many lawyers and solicitors and whatever it is, because those positions are seen as positions, something to be able to be proud to talk about. To brag about, have bragging rights with their friends and stuff like that. So quite often those decisions, and we're not, and as an age, we're not an age to push back sometimes, and like you say, it's not till you get further down the line, you're thinking, wow, this just isn't me. I'm doing it because, just because. So what 3 things, Sharon, have you learned about yourself during your career?
I am highly collaborative. And so I really enjoy working with a greater community. This is really important for me. And so as you could imagine, in the time that we live in now, where everyone is working remotely in front of a laptop, this is very challenging for me, because I like to touch and feel people. I like to see them. The situation is the way it is, and I'm sure things will loosen up eventually. But I really like being part of something bigger. That's really important for me. What else is important for me in my career is having a degree of freedom. I cannot be micromanaged. I cannot have my time micromanaged. I have a family, I have interests, and I also am very, very eager to deliver and produce as much as I can for whatever organization I work for. And I like to be given the consideration that I will be able to balance it all without someone telling me how to manage my time. So this is incredibly important for me. And the third thing that is important is it's really essential that I have the time to also pursue my personal interests. And there were many times in my life where I didn't do it. I was interested in things and I just could not find the time because I didn't have discipline, because you can always find the time. We always find the time to be on Facebook, on Instagram, and doing a whole bunch of things. But I didn't carve out the time for me. And what I have learned is, if I don't carve out the time for me, nobody else will.
Absolutely.
And so this is absolutely essential.
I often say that there's never the right time unless you find time.
Exactly.
You'll never have time unless you find time, because we can always find an excuse not to do it. Now, what stood out from what you just said, then you talked about community and you talked about personal interests, and you're working on a new project. Can you tell us a bit about it?
I'm working on a project where I am. Well, first, let me take a step back. I am a lover of stories. I love storytelling in all its forms. And so I have identified women in Central Europe who are not necessarily Austrian, but work in this part of the world, who have wonderful stories to tell about their careers and how they ended up in this part of the world. And they are not necessarily, top level executives, although some of them are. But I think it's important, in terms of understanding what kind of diverse world we live in, that it would be a great tool to introduce different sorts of faces. And so it's something that I'm working on now. I've identified several women who have agreed to interview with me. And I'm now just trying to figure out, which platform I will use and who I will ask to sponsor this in terms of organizations, because I think in order for it to get a bigger and wider voice, it needs to be connected with some organizations. So that's just a passion project. Nobody has asked me to do it, but I think it would be important in my contribution to, furthering diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in Central Europe.
Excellent. So my final, or probably my penultimate question, what does success feel like? That's a quick key word there, feel like to you, Sharon?
Success. Success feels like freedom. Freedom of everything, freedom of choice, the freedom to pursue the things that I need to pursue professionally and personally, the freedom to choose to work for companies, because they choose me, but I choose them as well, to work for organizations who value me and I value them. I don't think that freedom can be underestimated. When you feel like you have freedom and that you are not, somehow corralled into situations, it just lifts your spirit. And I think that's what success looks like for me.
Excellent. So my final question, Sharon, if anybody would love to connect with you or learn more about what you do, how can they do that?
Well, I'm not really on social media other than LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect with anybody, and certainly happy to have meetings with people who have similar interests or who might think it would just be fun to have a coffee with me, a virtual coffee with me.
Excellent. So thank you so much, Sharon. I will make sure I put the links in the show notes to connect with you. Thank you so much for joining me on This Woman Can this week.
Yeah, it's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you, Janice. And thank you for all of your help with your coaching services as well.
Thank you.